There's a powder my Amish neighbor Daniel keeps in an old coffee tin on his potting bench. It's white, it's cheap, and it kills soft-bodied garden pests faster than anything I ever bought at the store. I fought bugs with chemical sprays for 13 years before he showed it to me. Here's the part that bothers me. Back in the late 70s, the regulators started squeezing it out of garden use unquietly, no headlines, and today you'll have a hard time finding it on a shelf in nearly 24 states. Daniel never stopped using it. Stick with me to the end, because there's one mistake that turns this powder completely useless, and almost everybody makes it. Let me tell you who buried it, because that part matters more than most people realize. Back in the late 1970s, the federal government tightened the rules on what could be sold and labeled as a pest killer. The law is called FIFRA, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act. And by 1978, the registration deadlines under the EPA had real teeth. If you wanted to put a product on a shelf and call it something that kills bugs, you had to register it, test it, and then re-register it on a schedule every few years forever. That costs money, a lot of money. And here's the thing, the powder Daniel keeps in that coffee tin is a cheap common mineral that nobody owns. You can't patent it. You can't make it exclusive. So no company on earth was going to spend a fortune registering and re-registering a product they could never own and never mark up. It simply wasn't worth it to them. So it quietly slipped out of the garden pesticide aisle. On top of the federal rules, roughly 22 states require their own separate state pesticide registration, another stack of fees on a product with no profit in it. So in nearly 24 states labeled for garden pest control, it just disappeared. No headlines, no recall, no ban announcement. It vanished, and patented synthetic chemicals filled the space where it used to sit. And what did gardeners lose? A cheap, one-time tool. In its place, they got the chemical treadmill. Do you buy a bottle, spray, watch the pests come back tougher, buy another bottle. The pests built resistance. The good bugs died. Daniel never stopped using it on his Lancaster County farm. He never even noticed it was gone because he never bought it off a shelf in the first place. He just kept doing what his father did. So let me finally name it. The powder is food-grade diatomaceous earth. People call it DE for short. I want to be straight with you. It sounds exotic, but it's the most ordinary thing in the world. It's the fossilized shells of diatoms, microscopic water creatures that died millions of years ago and settled into beds of soft, chalky white rock. We mine it, grind it into a fine off-white powder, and that's it. A bag runs you about $15 to $20. And if you garden the way Daniel does, that one bag lasts several seasons. Daniel keeps his in a beat-up old coffee tin on his potting bench, and he dusts it on with an old flour sifter, the kind with the little hand crank, so it comes out in a thin, even cloud. The first time I saw him do it, I thought he was dusting powdered sugar on a pastry. That was my introduction to the thing that ended 13 years of me fighting bugs the hard way. And here's the part that ought to bother you. Like, something this cheap and this simple is exactly the kind of thing that gets squeezed off a shelf because there's no money in it for anybody. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because the way it kills is the whole reason the regulators could never fully stamp it out. I asked Daniel once how a little white powder could drop a slug faster than the sprays I'd been buying. He just said, "It doesn't poison them, Bill, it cuts them." And he's right. Under a microscope, those fossilized diatom shells aren't smooth. They're covered in razor-sharp edges, jagged as broken glass. To us, it feels soft as talcum. To a soft-bodied insect, it's a field of knives. When an aphid or a slug or a squash bug crawls across it, those microscopic edges scratch and pierce the waxy coating on the cuticle that holds the moisture inside the bug's body. Once that waxy seal is broken, the insect can't hold its water. It dries out. It dehydrates and dies, usually within 24 to 48 hours. That's the whole mechanism. It's physical. It's mechanical. It is not a chemical, and it is not a poison, and that distinction is everything. A chemical poison works on the bug's nervous system or its gut, and over enough generations, bugs evolve their way around it. That's how you get pesticide-resistant insects, the same way you get antibiotic-resistant germs. But you cannot evolve your way around a knife. A bug can't develop immunity to being physically cut open. There's no genetic trick for that. So DE never stops working, season after season, decade after decade, and no bug population ever gets tougher against it. That's why Daniel's been using the same method for 50 years with the same results, and that right there is why the suppression couldn't fully kill it. You can squeeze it off a shelf, and you can't stop a man from buying a bag of plain mineral powder. Let me tell you what it actually controls, because this is where most American gardeners would be shocked at the range. DE handles aphids, it handles slugs and snail. And if you've ever lost a row of seedlings to slugs overnight, you know what a gift that is. It handles squash bugs, cabbage worms, earwigs, flea beetles, and even ant trails. Basically anything soft-bodied that crawls. Daniel's garden, a quarter-mile from mine, has been running pest-free on this for as long as I've known him, and he's never owned a bottle of insecticide in his life. Now let me tell you about my own proof, because I didn't believe it until I lived it. A few summers back, the squash bugs hit my garden like an invading army. If you fought squash bugs, you know they're armored on top and almost impossible to spray. I'd tried the chemical sprays, the same kind I'd leaned on for 13 years, and they did next to nothing. The bugs just kept marching. So I did what I should have done from the start. I walked over, borrowed Daniel's method, and dusted DE on the undersides of every leaf and around the base of every plant in the evening. 2 days, that's all it took. 2 days, and the invasion was over. The sprays had failed me for a week, and a $15 bag of fossil dust shut it down in 48 hours. Daniel just nodded when I told him and said, "You weren't poisoning the garden. You were just drying out the bugs." Like, that's the difference, and it's exactly the kind of result that never makes it into the standard advice columns because there's no advertiser behind a bag of ground up rock. But here's the part that took me a while to understand, and it's the piece that separates the people who get this right from the people who hurt themselves or waste their money. There are two kinds of diatomaceous earth, and they are not the same thing. There's food grade DE. That's the one Daniel uses, the one in the coffee tin, the one you want. And then there's pool grade DE, sometimes called filter grade. Pool grade has been heated to extreme temperatures, a process called calcining. And that heat changes the silica into crystalline silica. Two big problems with that. First, the crystalline form doesn't kill pests the way the raw fossil shells do. It's been changed, so it's nearly useless in the garden. Second, and this is important, crystalline silica is a genuine respiratory hazard if you breathe the dust. So you never, ever want pool grade anywhere near your vegetables or your lungs. Food grade is the only kind that belongs in a garden. Get that one detail wrong and you've either wasted your time or put yourself at risk. And almost nobody at the store is going to explain that difference to you. The other thing Daniel taught me is that you don't blanket the whole garden with it. He's careful. He dusts only the undersides of the leaves and the soil right at the base of each plant, the places the soft-bodied pests travel. He never coats the open flowers, and he never dusts in the middle of the day when the bees are working. Because here's the honest truth. DE doesn't know a good bug from a bad bug. A knife cuts whatever crawls across it. So Daniel applies it targeted and low where the pests are and the pollinators aren't. That's the respectful way to use it, and it's the kind of careful, observant detail you only pick up by watching someone who's been doing this for half a century. Now, if what I'm walking you through here is making sense and you're starting to see how the Amish do this differently than the way most of us were taught, I want to point you to something. Everything I've shared today is one piece of a much bigger system, and DE is just one tool inside it. I put the whole thing into a book called The 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol. In Chapter 2, I lay out what I call the 5 defense layers, 5 concentric rings of protection that work together with a tool like this powder living in the mechanical last resort layer. If you're tired of the chemical treadmill and you want a complete system instead of a single tip, that's where it is. It's $17 at backyardbuildbooks.com. If you're watching on your TV, grab your phone and point it at the QR code on screen. Take your time finding it. I'll be right here. If you're on a phone or a laptop, the link's right down in the description. Now, let me come back to the question that still bothers me, why this got buried in the first place. Here's the thing. It was never really about safety. Food grade diatomaceous earth is safe enough that people stir it into livestock feed. Nobody pulled it because it was dangerous. They pulled it because nobody could make money on it. Think about it. It's a mineral. You dig it out of the ground. You can't patent a fossil, and once a gardener buys one $15 bag, that bag lasts 3 or 4 seasons. There's no second sale. There's no brand loyalty. There's no chemical company with a marketing budget. Now set that against the late 70s registration rules I mentioned. Under FIFRA, anything sold and labeled to kill pests had to be registered with the EPA and re-registered down the road. That costs real money. A synthetic chemical can carry that cost easily because it's patented, branded, and resold to you every single summer. A cheap, unpatentable powder can't. So the registration math quietly cleared the shelves in favor of the products somebody could profit from. On top of that, roughly 24 states require their own separate state pesticide registration, another fee, another stack of paperwork on a product that earns no margin to pay for any of it. So in about 22 states, the garden-labeled version just disappeared. No ban, no headline. It simply stopped being worth the trouble for anyone to keep it on the shelf. And I'll be fair, because you deserve that. Nobody outlawed the powder for being harmful. You can argue this was just the registration system working the way it was designed to. That's a reasonable point, but that's exactly why it's so quiet. A real ban makes the news. A product that's safe, that works, and that simply isn't profitable enough to register. That one just fades out, and most folks never notice it left. Here's what it cost you and me: years on the chemical treadmill, buying spray after spray that bred tougher pests every season, while killing off the ladybugs and lacewings that would have done the work for free. I lived that for 13 years. Daniel never did. He just kept reaching into his coffee tin, the way his family always has. Now stick with me, because I promised you the one mistake that turns this powder completely useless, and almost everybody makes it. Here it is. They apply it wet, or they let it get wet. Diatomaceous earth only works bone dry. Those microscopic edges only cut and scratch when the powder's dry and loose. The second it gets rained on, watered, or dusted onto leaves still damp with morning dew, it clumps up. The edges round over, and it does absolutely nothing until it dries out again. So here's what happens. A gardener dusts it on in the morning, then waters the bed an hour later, or they sprinkle it on right before a rain rolls in. 2 days later, they look at their aphids, still chewing away, and they decide the stuff is a scam. It isn't. They just drowned it. Daniel does it the way his father did. He waits for a dry evening after the dew is burned off and the leaves are completely dry. He dusts the undersides of the leaves in the soil right at the base of the plant, and that's where the soft-bodied bugs hide. He uses that old flour sifter for a thin, even coat, never a thick cake of it. And he reapplies after every single rain, because every rain washes the last batch dead. That's the whole secret. Dry powder, dry leaves, evening, reapply after rain. And that one detail. That's why so many people tried it once, decided it didn't work, and went back to the bottle on the shelf, which suited the folks selling that bottle just fine. Before I let you go, I want to come back to something. Now you got the tool, and you got the one mistake that ruins it. But knowing what's hitting your tomatoes versus your squash versus your cabbage, that's the next piece. In Chapter 8 of the 30-day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol, I go crop by crop, the exact pests that hammer each vegetable, and the prevention and intervention steps for each one, so you know precisely where a powder like this fits and where you need a different layer instead. It's everything Daniel has shown me over 35 years, organized into a 30-day protocol you can start this weekend. If you respect the old way of doing things and you want the whole system, it's at backyardbuildbooks.com. On your TV, point your phone at the QR code on screen. Go ahead and grab it now. No rush, I'll wait. On a phone or laptop, the link's in the description. So that's the story. A cheap white mineral powder, food grade, diatomaceous earth that kills soft-bodied pests by cutting them, not poisoning them, quietly squeezed off the shelves in the late 70s because nobody could profit from it. Now you've got the tool most gardeners lost, and the one mistake that ruins it. Daniel still keeps his in that coffee tin, and on a few hundred Amish farms right now. It's just how Tuesday looks. Next time I'll show you another one of these. The chemical aisle would rather you forgot. I'll see you in the next one.